It was a warm summer evening when I first heard the whispers. I had just moved into my new apartment, and everything seemed perfect. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the city skyline, and the sound of traffic hummed in the distance. I was unpacking my boxes, enjoying the peace and quiet of my new home. That's when I heard it. At first, it was just a faint murmur, like the sound of someone talking in another room. I couldn't make out the words, but I assumed it was just my neighbors. But as the night wore on, the whispers grew louder and more insistent. I tried to ignore them, but they kept me up all night. The voices were constant, a never-ending stream of chatter that I couldn't escape. I tossed and turned, trying to block out the sound, but it was no use. The next day, I asked my neighbors about the noise, but they looked at me like I was crazy. They said they hadn't heard anything out of the ordinary. I was starting to worry that I was losing my mind. But the whispers continued. They followed me everywhere I went, like a shadow that I couldn't shake. I tried to drown them out with music and TV shows, but they were always there, lurking in the background. As the days passed, the whispers grew more ominous. I started to make out words and phrases, and they filled me with a sense of dread. I heard things like "leave" and "get out," and it made me wonder if there was something sinister at play. One night, I decided to try to confront the whispers. I sat in silence, listening intently to what they were saying. At first, it was just random phrases and fragments of conversation. But then, I heard something that chilled me to the bone. It was a voice, cold and menacing, telling me to leave. It was so clear that I could almost feel the breath on my ear. I bolted out of my apartment, not looking back until I was safely outside. I started to do some research, trying to figure out what could be causing the whispers. I discovered that my apartment building used to be a hospital in the 1920s, and that there had been rumors of strange happenings there for years. I tried to convince myself that it was all just superstition, that there was a logical explanation for the whispers. But deep down, I knew that something wasn't right. That's when the nightmares started. I dreamt of shadowy figures lurking in the corners of my room and of voices whispering my name. I woke up screaming, drenched in sweat, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. I started to avoid my apartment, spending my days wandering around the city, trying to avoid the whispers that followed me everywhere I went. But no matter how far I ran, they were always there, like a dark cloud hanging over my head. I was desperate for answers, for a way to make the whispers stop. So one night, I went back to my apartment, armed with a recorder to capture the voices. I sat in silence, waiting for the whispers to start. At first, there was nothing. But then, I heard the faint murmur of voices in the background. I pressed the recorder closer to my ear, trying to make out what they were saying. And then, just as suddenly as they had started, the whispers stopped. The apartment was silent, and I was left with more questions than answers. I listened to the recording over and over again, trying to decipher the words. And then, I heard it. It was a voice, deep and menacing, telling me to get out. I was shaken to my core. The voice was so clear, so vivid, that I couldn't deny its existence. I knew that I had to get out of that apartment no matter what the cost. But leaving wasn't going to be easy. I had just signed a year-long lease, and breaking it would mean losing a lot of money. Plus, I didn't have anywhere else to go. I was trapped. The whispers continued to haunt me, following me wherever I went. I started to feel like I was losing my grip on reality. Was I really hearing these voices, or was it all in my head? One day, I decided to confront my landlord about the whispers. I told him about the recording and about the strange things that had been happening in my apartment. He looked at me skeptically, but promised to look into it. A few days later, he called me back with some disturbing news. He had done some digging and had discovered that my apartment was built on top of an old graveyard. It had been bulldozed over in the 1920s to make way for the hospital, but the bodies had never been properly moved. I was horrified. The thought of living on top of a graveyard with the spirits of the dead whispering in my ear was too much to bear. I begged my landlord to let me out of my lease, but he refused. That night, I was awoken by a sound. It was a low, rumbling noise like someone dragging a heavy object across the floor. I sat up in bed, heart pounding, and listened. The sound continued, getting louder and more insistent. I knew that I had to leave, and I had to leave now. I threw some clothes into a bag and ran out of the apartment, not looking back until I was outside. As I walked away, I could hear the whispers following me. They were louder than ever, their voices filled with anger and frustration. But I didn't care. I was free. It's been years since I left that apartment, but I still hear the whispers from time to time. They follow me wherever I go, like a constant reminder of the horrors that I endured. I don't know if the ghosts of the graveyard will ever let me go. But one thing is for sure. I will never forget the terror that I felt and the whispers that haunted me every step of the way.